The stars disappeared first. Every telescope on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies suddenly showed the same thing. Darkness where there should have been light. Something massive had arrived at the edge of the solar system, something so large it blocked out entire constellations. President Dae-hyun stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching the screens with his advisors. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of computers and the nervous breathing of 200 people, who suddenly understood that humanity was not alone in the universe. More importantly, they understood that whoever had arrived was not friendly. The message came at exactly midnight Universal Coordinated Time. Every screen on Earth lit up simultaneously. Every phone, every computer, every holographic display in every home and office and street corner across the solar system showed the same image. A creature that looked vaguely like a mantis crossed with an octopus, its multiple eyes gleaming with cold intelligence. "People of Earth," the creature spoke, and the translation software embedded in the broadcast rendered its words in every human language simultaneously. "I am High Arbiter Velmoth of the Galactic Council. For 10,000 of your years, the Council has maintained order across this galaxy. We have watched you, we have judged you, and we find you in violation of the sacred edict of expansion." Defense Minister Hana stepped closer to Dae-hyun, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm even though she knew it would be useless. "What edict?" she whispered. "We never heard of any edict." On screen, Velmoth continued, "Your species has spread beyond your birth world without council permission. You have established colonies on multiple planets and moons. You have built weapons. You have sent signals into the void, claiming territory that is not yours to claim. This cannot be tolerated." The image shifted, showing the Council fleet in all its terrible glory. Thousands of ships, each one the size of a city, hung in space like predators waiting to strike. Their hulls seemed organic, pulsing with bioluminescent light, covered in what looked like scales or armor plating. Weapon ports gaped like hungry mouths. "You have 72 hours to comply with the following terms," Velmoth declared. 1. Dismantle all off-world colonies and return your population to Earth. 2. Destroy all military vessels and weapons capable of orbital deployment. 3. Submit to Council oversight and accept your place as a subject species. Failure to comply will result in total extinction. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. We are the Council. We have ended 1,000 species who refuse to obey. You will not be the first and you will not be the last. The transmission ended. For a long moment, nobody in the command center moved. Then chaos erupted. Advisors shouted over each other. Military commanders demanded action plans. Scientists babbled about impossible technologies. Through it all, Dae-hyun stood silent, his eyes fixed on the now dark screens. Chief Strategist Tae-min pulled up a holographic display showing the tactical situation. His hands shook as he manipulated the controls. "Mr. President, preliminary analysis shows their fleet has energy signatures we can barely measure. One of their ships could destroy our entire orbital defense network. All of them together could sterilize the planet in minutes." "How long would we last in a fight?" Dae-hyun asked quietly. Admiral Dong-jun, commander of the Terran Defense Fleet, cleared his throat. "Hours, sir. Maybe days if we're lucky and they're careless. But we'd lose. There's no question about that." Across the solar system, similar scenes played out in every human settlement. On Mars, Colony Administrator Hyun-woo gathered his people in the central dome. Some were crying. Others were angry. A few were already packing, preparing to evacuate back to Earth. On Europa Station, scientists abandoned their work studying the subsurface ocean to stare at the sky, wondering if they'd ever see another sunrise. But something strange happened as the initial panic faded. Humanity, faced with extinction, did not simply surrender. They did what humans had always done when backed into a corner. They started planning. Dae-hyun called an emergency session of the Terran Coalition's Security Council. Leaders from every major nation and colony appeared on holographic displays, their faces grim but determined. He listened to their arguments for an hour. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to negotiate. A few even suggested they comply and hope for mercy later. Then he raised his hand for silence. "We need more information," he said. "We need to understand who we're dealing with. Hana, what do we know about this Galactic Council?" The defense minister pulled up everything their telescopes and satellites had gathered. "Not much, sir. But what we do know is troubling. Their ships don't emit the kind of radiation we'd expect from conventional propulsion. They're not using nuclear drives or ion engines. It's something else. Something we don't understand, and they've been out there for at least a week just watching us. A week? Dae-hyun leaned forward. They were observing us before they made contact. Yes, sir. Which means they know more about us than we know about them. Chief Science Advisor Gina spoke up from her display. Mr. President, I've been reviewing the message. There's something odd about their ultimatum. They call themselves the Galactic Council, which implies multiple species working together. They talk about order and rules. This isn't a mindless invasion. They have a system, a hierarchy, probably bureaucracy. They think they're the legitimate authority. Dae-hyun nodded slowly. An idea was forming in his mind. Something dangerous and possibly insane. What if we don't panic? The room fell silent. Taemin stared at him. Sir? They expect us to either fight desperately or surrender immediately. What if we do neither? What if we just continue living? Dae-hyun stood and walked to the main display. They're giving us 72 hours. Let's use that time. Not to mobilize for war, not to prepare for surrender. Let's just show them who we are. Hana frowned. I don't understand, sir. We're going to call their bluff, Dae-hyun said. Or at least we're going to make them think we have something they should worry about. Jinna, I want you to quietly activate every defense protocol we've ever discussed. Every contingency plan, everything, but don't broadcast it. Let them discover it if they're watching. Dongjun, move the fleet into defensive positions, but do it slowly. Make it look routine. Hana, I want you to contact every military installation in the system and tell them to maintain normal operations. And what will you do, sir? Taemin asked. Dae-hyun smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a poker player about to go all in with a pair of twos. I'm going to accept their invitation to respond. I'm going to tell the entire galaxy that Earth has heard the Council's ultimatum, and then I'm going to do something they won't expect. I'm going to thank them for their patience and invite them to observe our world while we prepare our answer. The advisor stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But Dae-hyun had studied history his entire life. He knew that humanity's greatest victories often came not from superior strength, but from superior audacity, from making the enemy doubt, from changing the game when you couldn't win by the current rules. Broadcast the message on all channels, he ordered. And somebody get me a good suit. If we're going to face extinction, we might as well look good doing it. 3 hours later, every being in the galaxy with access to communication technology watched as the leader of humanity stood before cameras and delivered his response to the Council's ultimatum. He spoke for exactly 3 minutes. He acknowledged their message. He requested 72 hours to consult with his people. And he smiled. That smile would haunt High Arbiter Velmoth for the rest of his life. It was not the smile of a defeated species. It was not even the smile of a defiant one. It was something else entirely. The smile of someone who knew something you didn't. The smile of a species that had surprised itself too many times to be surprised by anyone else. The Council had expected fear. They had expected anger or desperate pleas. They got none of that. They got a smile and an invitation to watch. In the command center, as the broadcast ended, Taemin leaned close to Dae-hyun. Sir, do we actually have a plan? The president's smile never wavered. We have 72 hours to figure that out. Let's get to work. High Arbiter Velmoth did not like uncertainty. In his 300 years of service to the Galactic Council, he had overseen the subjugation of 17 species. Each time the pattern was the same: shock, denial, anger, desperate resistance, and finally acceptance. The humans should have followed this pattern. Instead, they smiled and went about their day. He watched the surveillance feeds from Earth with growing confusion. 24 hours had passed since the ultimatum. Cities continued to function normally. Traffic moved through streets. Markets sold food. Children attended schools. On Mars, the colonists were actually hosting some kind of music festival. It made no sense. Perhaps they are in denial, suggested Military Commander Thelvar, a towering creature covered in chitinous armor. Some species refuse to accept reality until we demonstrate our power. But Council Mystic Ornsha, a being of pure thought inhabiting a crystalline matrix, disagreed. There is intentionality here. They want us to see this normalcy. They are communicating something. Velmoth made his decision. Send observer teams. 3 units. I want them on Earth within 6 hours. They are to blend in, study the humans, and report back. I need to understand what we're dealing with before the deadline expires. The teams were assembled quickly. First was Korval, a warrior from a species that valued honor and combat above all else. Second was Shilin, a telepathic being who could read surface thoughts and emotions. Third was Brekton, an artificial intelligence that could interface with any computer system. They were given holographic disguises to appear human and deployed to different cities across Earth. Korval materialized on a street corner in Seoul. His disguise made him look like a tall human male, though he felt ridiculous wearing the soft fabrics humans called clothing. He had studied human combat tactics during the flight to Earth, expecting to find a warrior culture preparing for a desperate last stand. What he found instead confused him deeply. The first humans he encountered were two young people jogging past him, laughing as they ran. They were not fleeing danger. They were exercising for recreation. He followed them to a large building where dozens of humans were lifting heavy objects repeatedly, running on machines that went nowhere, and hitting bags filled with sand. They were training their bodies for combat, but doing it for fun. He sat at a nearby cafe watching and listening. Two humans at the next table caught his attention. They were engineers based on their conversation, discussing something called a contingency plan while drinking bitter brown liquid. I heard they activated garden wall protocols, one said. A woman named Jiwoo, her companion Yuna, nodded. About time. We've been running drills for years. Taeyoung's team finished the Jupiter platform installation last month. Think it'll be enough? Yuna shrugged. Doesn't matter. It's what we've got. Besides, you know what they say. Humans don't plan to succeed, we plan to spite death itself. They both laughed, actually laughed, and continued their conversation about music and weekend plans. Korval reported back to Velmoth with confusion. These humans train for combat as entertainment. They discuss weapon systems while planning social gatherings. I do not understand this species. Across the planet, Shilin was having an even more disturbing experience. She had materialized in a hospital in Stockholm, hoping to read the emotional state of a population facing extinction. What she found made her question her own sanity. The humans were terrified. She could feel it in waves of anxiety and fear that washed over her telepathic senses. But underneath that fear was something else. Determination, stubbornness, and a dark amusement that she could not comprehend. It was as if they were afraid but had decided fear would not stop them from doing whatever they planned to do. She observed a doctor named Subin treating patients. The woman's hands were steady as she set a child's broken arm, her voice calm as she explained the procedure. But Shilin could feel the storm of emotions beneath that calm surface, worry for her family, anger at the council, and strangely, hope. During a break, Subin stood at a window, looking up at the sky where the council fleet waited. Another doctor joined her. Your brother's ship deployed to the Mars defense line, he said quietly. Subin nodded. Kyungsu knows what he signed up for. We all do. You think we can win? Win? No. Survive? Maybe. Make them regret threatening us? Definitely. She turned away from the window. Now let's get back to work. These patients need us regardless of what's happening up there. Shilin reported to Velmoth with trembling thought patterns. High Arbiter, these beings are impossible to read fully. They contain contradictions. They are terrified but defiant. They are compassionate but dangerous. They prepare for death while hoping for life. I cannot predict their behavior. The third observer, Brekton, infiltrated Earth's computer networks. As an artificial intelligence, it could process vast amounts of data simultaneously. What it discovered in those first hours shocked its logic circuits. Human computer systems were surprisingly advanced but chaotically organized. They had no central control. Information flowed freely, often contradicting itself. Brekton found thousands of files labeled what-if scenarios, where humans had simulated everything from alien invasions to asteroid impacts. To their own extinction through various means, they had actually spent time imagining all the ways they could die and planning responses to each scenario. But one file caught Brekton's attention. It was buried deep in military systems, encrypted with quantum-level security that took nearly an hour to crack. The file was labeled Operation Garden Wall, and it contained incomplete data, schematics for weapon systems, deployment coordinates throughout the solar system. references to technologies that seemed impossible for a species at humanity's development level. Most disturbing were the notes attached to various sections. Prototype untested, theoretical only, may not work. Last resort, use only if Earth is lost. And one that made Brechton's processors freeze. If they find this file, we want them to find it. It was a trap. Or a bluff. Or possibly real. Brechton could not determine which. Meanwhile, Korval had made his way to a military base disguised as a civilian facility. He watched human soldiers training. They moved well, their techniques efficient. But what struck him was their attitude. They joked with each other. They complained about food and weather. They seemed almost relaxed. He managed to eavesdrop on a briefing where an officer addressed a group of young pilots. "Listen up," the officer said. "We all know what's up there. We all know the odds. Command isn't asking us to win. They're asking us to make it cost. Every ship we take down is one less ship that threatens Earth. Every minute we buy is another minute for the civilians to get to shelters. And who knows? Maybe we'll surprise ourselves." A pilot raised her hand. "Sir, what if the new systems don't work?" "Then we use the old systems. And if those don't work, we ram them. Humanity didn't claw its way to the top of Earth's food chain by knowing when to quit. We're the species that looked at the ocean and decided to cross it in wooden boats. We looked at the sky and decided to fly. We looked at space and decided it was ours. Some oversized bureaucrats in fancy ships aren't going to change that." The pilots actually cheered. Korval found himself disturbed by a realization. These humans were not preparing to fight because they thought they could win. They were preparing to fight because they refused to not fight. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was terrifying. On Mars, the observers found something even stranger. The colony administrator, Hyun Woo, was giving tours to anyone who wanted to see the terraforming operations. One of the council's disguised observers joined a tour group. "This is where we grow Earth crops in Martian soil," Hyun Woo explained, gesturing to vast greenhouses. "Took us 50 years to get the soil chemistry right. Lost a lot of crops. Lost some people too when the early domes failed. But we didn't quit." A child in the tour group asked, "Are the aliens going to make us leave?" Hyunwoo knelt down to the child's level. "Maybe. But here's the thing about humans, we don't leave easily. We built this. This is ours, and if someone wants to take it, they're going to have to explain why they think they have that right." He stood and continued the tour. "Now who wants to see the water extraction facility?" The council observer noticed that every colonist they passed was wearing a small badge. A blue marble, Earth surrounded by red dust, Mars. The message was clear. "We belong to both worlds now." All three observers reported back to Velmoth simultaneously. Their messages were confused, contradictory, and deeply unsettling. Korval reported a species that treated violence as both entertainment and last resort. Shailene reported minds full of contradictions and impossible to fully predict. Brechton reported evidence of weapon systems that might or might not exist, protected by security that seemed designed to be eventually broken. "They want us to know they have defenses," Brechton concluded, "but they also want us to doubt whether those defenses are real. This is psychological warfare at a level I have not encountered before." Velmoth reviewed all the data. 48 hours remained until the deadline. The humans had not surrendered. They had not attacked. They had just continued existing, while dropping hints that they were far more prepared than they should be. "Recommendation?" He asked his advisors. "Destroy them," Thelvar said immediately. The final hours approached like a countdown to the end of the world. Across the galaxy, billions of beings tuned in to watch humanity's response to the Council's ultimatum. Betting pools opened on various worlds. Most bets favored immediate surrender. A few optimistic gamblers bet on a desperate last stand. Nobody bet on what actually happened. President Daehyun stood in the broadcast center, adjusting his tie for the third time. Defense Minister Hana stood beside him reviewing last-minute details on a datapad. Admiral Dongjun and Chief Science Advisor Jinna waited nearby, their expressions carefully neutral. "Are we really doing this?" Hana asked quietly. Daehyun nodded. "We're all in now. No turning back. And if they call our bluff, then we show them it wasn't entirely a bluff." He took a deep breath. "Ready?" The broadcast went live to every screen in the solar system and beyond. The Council fleet, still positioned at the edge of human space, certainly received the transmission. Velmoth himself watched from his command throne, surrounded by his advisors. Daehyun appeared on screen looking calm and collected. High Arbiter Velamoth, members of the Galactic Council and all beings watching across the galaxy. The Council issued an ultimatum 72 hours ago. They demanded our surrender, the abandonment of our colonies, and our submission to their authority. We have reviewed this ultimatum carefully. Our answer is no. A murmur ran through the Council's command ship. Thelvar leaned forward eagerly. Finally, they will fight. But Daehyun continued speaking. However, we understand you may not accept this answer peacefully, so we would like to show you something. We would like to show you what humanity has been doing for the past 2 centuries while you watched us from afar. Gina stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the entire solar system. When we first detected artificial signals from deep space 180 years ago, we had a choice. We could hope they were friendly, or we could prepare for the possibility they were not. Being human, we did both. Red markers began appearing across the holographic solar system. Dozens at first, then hundreds, then thousands. These are the defensive installations we have built over the past 2 centuries. Railgun batteries on Luna, mass driver networks on Mars and its moons, kinetic missile platforms throughout the asteroid belt, antimatter mines seated in the Kuiper belt, every one of them operational, every one of them targeted at your fleet. The Council's sensors immediately began scanning. What they found confirmed Jinna's words. The installations existed. They were active, but Velmoth quickly calculated their combined firepower. Impressive for a young species, he transmitted on a secure channel to Thelvar, but still insufficient to threaten our fleet. On Earth, Jinna smiled as if she had heard his thought. But those are just the conventional defenses. The ones we built first when we were still learning. Let me show you what we built after we got better at this. The display shifted. New markers appeared, these ones pulsing with orange light, hidden in the sun's corona, protected by stellar radiation that would destroy conventional sensors. Solar ejection weapons. They redirect solar flares into focused beams. We have 17 of them. We have never test-fired them at full power because the energy release would be visible across the galaxy. Velmoth sensors confirmed massive installations embedded in the sun's outer layers. The energy signatures matched what the human described. He felt the first stirring of doubt. Concealed within Jupiter's radiation belts, Admiral Dongjun took over the presentation, are quantum disruptor platforms. They create localized fields that interfere with the exotic matter many advanced species use for faster-than-light travel. We studied your ship's signatures when you arrived. We believe these disruptors would be effective against your propulsion systems. The Council's science team hurriedly analyzed their own ship designs. The assessment came back quickly. If such disruptors existed and functioned as described, they could indeed cripple the fleet's mobility. Ships would be trapped in normal space, vulnerable, buried in Earth's ocean trenches. Jinna continued, her voice dropping slightly. Our gray goo nanite reserves, self-replicating, self-modifying, and programmed with one purpose: consume any non-biological matter they encounter. We call them the scorched earth option. If Earth is lost, if our species faces extinction, we release them into space. Within weeks, they would spread throughout the solar system. Within months, they could reach nearby stars. They would consume your fleet. They would consume any fleet sent to investigate. We built them hoping we would never need them. But they exist, they wait, and if we fall, they launch automatically. Silence fell across the Council flagship. Grey goo scenarios were theoretical nightmares that the Council had banned 10,000 years ago, after one species nearly destroyed all life in a neighboring sector. The idea that humans had actually built such weapons was horrifying. You're bluffing, Thelvar declared. These are elaborate lies. But Brekton, the AI observer, transmitted a dissenting opinion. I found references to these systems in Earth's military databases. The encryption protecting those files was sophisticated. The information was designed to be found with effort. This could be elaborate deception, or it could be truth. Without testing, we cannot know. Daehyun stepped forward again. And finally, stationed beyond Pluto, in the darkness where your sensors cannot easily reach, our prototype faster-than-light missile platforms. We reverse-engineered the technology from debris we found drifting through our system 30 years ago. Some ship had a battle here long ago. We studied what remained. We learned. The missiles aren't perfect. They might not work at all. But if they do work, they can reach your fleet in seconds, and they carry relativistic kill vehicles, mass accelerated to 90% light speed. The display showed the final installations, scattered throughout the outer solar system. The Council's long-range sensors struggled to confirm or deny their existence at that distance. Uncertainty was the worst enemy of military planning. All of these systems are now active, Admiral Dongjun stated flatly. All of them are targeted at your fleet. Some of them might fail. Some of them might be less effective than we hope. But some of them will work. And the question you need to ask yourselves is, how many ships are you willing to lose to find out which ones? Velmoth felt his confidence eroding. Everything these humans said could be a bluff. But their observers had reported that humans were excellent at psychological warfare, at making threats that might or might not be real. The installations were real, but were the weapons as dangerous as claimed? Then Daehyun delivered the final message. We don't want war, High Arbiter. Humanity has fought enough wars among ourselves. We know what war costs. We know the price of victory and the deeper price of defeat. But we also know something you seem to have forgotten during your 10,000 years of unchallenged rule. He paused, and his expression hardened. We know that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to make war unthinkable. You came to our system expecting us to surrender, because you thought we had no choice. We're showing you that we always have a choice. We can choose to die on our feet rather than live on our knees. We can choose to make our extinction so costly that you would rather let us live. Hana stepped forward. Here is our counteroffer, High Arbiter. Leave our solar system. Acknowledge humanity's sovereignty over the worlds we have settled. In exchange, we will not fire on your fleet. We will not pursue you. And perhaps in the future we can meet again. Not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals. You have your civilization. We have ours. Let's keep it that way. We give you 72 hours to decide, Daehyun added. The same time you gave us. Seems fair, doesn't it? The transmission ended. Across human space, millions held their breath. On the Council flagship, chaos erupted. Thelvar demanded an immediate attack. Other advisors counseled caution. Species representatives from the 12 Council races argued about risk assessment and acceptable losses. Velmoth silenced them all with a gesture. Options? Attack now, Thelvar insisted. Most of their weapons are likely non-functional or exaggerated. We can overwhelm them through sheer numbers. At what cost? Ornsha asked quietly. Even if 90% of their weapons fail, the remaining 10% could destroy hundreds of our ships. Are you prepared to sacrifice that many lives to punish one stubborn species? Test their defenses, another advisor suggested. Fire on one of their outer installations. See how they respond. Velmoth considered this. Target the unmanned outpost in the Kuiper Belt. Long-range bombardment. Do not approach within missile range. The order was given. A Council cruiser fired a plasma beam at a small human outpost on a distant rock of ice and metal. The beam struck true, vaporizing the installation in seconds. The Council monitored for response. It came faster than thought. A relativistic kill vehicle, launched from a position 3 light minutes away, crossed the distance in heartbeats. The Council cruiser had no time to evade. The projectile, a simple rod of tungsten accelerated to 90% of light speed, struck the ship's midsection. The kinetic energy of impact was apocalyptic. The cruiser came apart in a flash of vaporized metal and atmosphere. 3,000 crew died instantly. High Arbiter Velmoth had not felt fear in over a century. He felt it now, watching the debris field where his cruiser had been. 3,000 lives ended in a fraction of a second by a weapon so simple and yet so devastatingly effective that it made all of the Council's sophisticated technology seem fragile. The command deck of his flagship was silent except for the soft humming of biological systems and the quiet breathing of his crew. Nobody spoke. They were all thinking the same thing. If the humans could do that once, they could do it 50,000 times. Analysis, Velmoth finally ordered, his voice barely steady. His science advisor, a crystalline being named Merikoth, projected holographic data. The projectile was pure tungsten, accelerated to 90.3% light speed. Kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon, but that's not what disturbs me most, High Arbiter. Explain. The projectile was launched before we fired on their outpost. They predicted our test. They knew exactly where we would strike, calculated our likely firing position, and had the weapon en route before we made our decision. This level of tactical prediction suggests either precognitive abilities or such a deep understanding of our psychology that they can anticipate our actions. Military Commander, Thelvar slammed his armored fist against a console. This is unacceptable. We cannot allow one species to threaten the Council's authority. If we retreat, others will see it as weakness. The entire Galactic Order could collapse. The Galactic Order will definitely collapse if we're all dead, Intelligence Officer Prina countered. The small fox-like being pulled up additional data. I've been analyzing human history. This species has survived multiple near-extinction events. Ice ages, volcanic winters, plagues that killed half their population, and during their most recent global conflict, they developed nuclear weapons and actually used them on themselves. They know what it means to risk everything. Velmoth studied the data flowing across his screens. He had overseen the subjugation of 17 species. None of them had been like this. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, chose survival over pride. But the humans seemed to have calculated that making their extinction costly was more valuable than simple survival. What are the odds that all their weapons are functional? He asked. Brecton, the AI observer, responded immediately. Impossible to determine with certainty. Probability analysis suggests the conventional defenses are real, 99% confidence. The solar weapons are real, 80% confidence. The quantum disruptors are theoretical, but potentially viable, 60% confidence. The gray goo is terrifying if real, but possibly a bluff, 50% confidence. The FTL missiles are either non-functional prototypes or deadly weapons, 40% confidence. So some of it is definitely real, and some of it might be real. Correct, and that uncertainty is precisely what makes them dangerous. We cannot determine which systems will work until we're being attacked by them. Oransha, the Council mystic, finally spoke. The crystalline being had been silent since the cruiser's destruction, processing the situation through its unique perspective. I have consulted the probability matrices. There are 3 possible outcomes to direct confrontation. First, we attack and their weapons fail. We win but suffer minimal casualties. Probability 15%. Second, we attack and some of their weapons function. We win but lose between 30 and 60% of the fleet. Probability 45%. Third, we attack and most of their weapons function. The outcome becomes uncertain. Probability 40%. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. Even in the best-case scenarios, the Council would suffer losses. And there was a very real possibility that the humans could inflict devastating damage or even achieve a stalemate. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, Thelvar said. We cannot let fear of casualties prevent us from maintaining order. It's not fear of casualties, Velmoth replied quietly. It's fear of uncertainty. We've grown accustomed to knowing we will win. The humans have introduced doubt into our calculations. That is what makes them dangerous. A priority message arrived from the Council homeworld. The High Senate itself was demanding answers. Representatives from all 12 member species were watching, waiting to see how Velmoth would handle the situation. Some were hawkish, demanding immediate punishment. Others were cautious, worried about setting precedents. But what worried Velmoth most was the message from his old mentor, former Arbiter Kol Vess, who had retired to a monastery world decades ago. The message was simple. Velmoth, I have watched the humans carefully. They remind me of us 10,000 years ago when we were young and desperate and willing to risk everything for survival. Be careful. Species like that have a way of surprising those who underestimate them. Velmoth called a strategy session with his senior commanders. They gathered in the war room, a circular chamber where holographic displays showed tactical data from every angle. Propose solutions, he ordered. Full assault, Thelvar suggested immediately. Yes, we'll take casualties. But overwhelming force should prevail. We have 2,000 warships. They have defensive installations. Ships can maneuver. Installations cannot. Their autonomous kill vehicles can maneuver, Prina pointed out. And unlike our ships, they don't carry crew. They're expendable. We are not. Another commander suggested blockade. Seal off the system. Prevent them from expanding further. In a century or two, they'll exhaust their resources and have to negotiate, during which time they continue developing weapons, Murkoff objected. You saw how quickly they reverse-engineered FTL technology from debris. Give them a century and they might actually exceed our capabilities. A third option was proposed: diplomatic resolution. Negotiate a treaty. Establish boundaries. Allow them autonomy within their system in exchange for agreeing to council oversight of their expansion into other star systems. Thelvar scoffed. And show weakness to the entire galaxy? Is it weakness to recognize a worthy opponent? Ornsha asked. The humans have not attacked us. They have defended their territory. There is honor in that for those species who value such things. The debate continued for hours. Meanwhile, messages poured in from across council space. Some species demanded action. Others urged caution. And a few, the younger species who had been forcibly integrated into the council in the past few millennia, began asking dangerous questions. One transmission particularly caught Velmoth's attention. It came from the Vorlian Republic, a species that had submitted to council authority 800 years ago. Their ambassador's message was brief. If the humans can resist the council, why did we surrender? What would happen if we reconsidered our membership? That was the real danger. Not the humans themselves, but what their resistance represented. For 10,000 years, the council had maintained order through the assumption of inevitable victory. The humans had shattered that assumption. Even if the council destroyed humanity utterly, the damage was done. Doubt had been introduced. Velmoth made a decision. I'm going to speak with the human leader directly. Private channel. No advisors, just two leaders discussing reality. His staff objected, but he overruled them. Within minutes, a secure channel was established. President Daehyun appeared on the holographic display, looking tired but alert. High Arbiter, he greeted. I didn't expect a personal call. Nor did I expect to make one, Velmoth admitted. But I find myself in an unusual position. You have introduced uncertainty into what should have been a simple operation. Simple for you, perhaps. Extinction is never simple for those facing it. Indeed. Velmoth paused, choosing his words carefully. Tell me truthfully, can you defeat my fleet? Daehyun considered the question. Defeat? No. Damage severely? Yes. Make you regret attacking us? Absolutely. Cost you enough ships that other species might start questioning your authority? Almost certainly. So you admit you cannot win. Winning isn't about survival alone. It's about the price we make you pay. Our history is full of last stands. High Arbiter, Thermopylae, the Alamo, Stalingrad. Places where small forces held against impossible odds not because they could win, but because they could make winning so costly that it changed the course of history. Velmoth felt a chill run through his body. You're prepared to die for that? Every human in this solar system has accepted that possibility. We're not suicidal. We don't want to die. But we've decided that some things are worth dying for. Freedom is one of them. There was a long silence. Then Daehyun added, But here's the thing, High Arbiter. We don't have to be enemies. You came here expecting us to submit, because you thought you were the established authority. We resisted because we thought you were invaders. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe there's a third option neither of us considered, which is equals partners. We have things you could benefit from. Innovation, adaptability, different perspectives. You have things we need. Knowledge, technology, connections to the wider galaxy. Why waste resources destroying each other when we could learn from each other? Velmoth wanted to dismiss this as naive optimism. But he couldn't, because deep down he knew Daehyun was right. The council had grown stagnant. 10,000 years of unchallenged authority had made them rigid, predictable. The humans were chaotic and dangerous. The council fleet had been at the edge of human space for 6 days. The 72-hour deadline humanity had given the council had passed 3 days ago. Both sides waited, weapons armed but not firing, like two fighters circling each other, looking for an opening that might never come. High Arbiter Velmoth stood before the Grand Senate, the ruling body of the Galactic Council. 12 species, hundreds of representatives, all demanding answers. The holographic chamber stretched across light years, connecting council worlds in real-time communication. The air crackled with tension and barely restrained anger. You have allowed a primitive species to threaten the council, Senator Crevasse thundered, his serpentine form coiling in agitation. We demand immediate action. Destroy them. Make an example. Show the galaxy what happens to those who defy us. Other voices joined in agreement, but not all of them. Senator Weyla, representing one of the younger council species, spoke carefully. Perhaps we should consider why they resist. The humans claim sovereignty over worlds they have settled. Is that not a reasonable request? Reasonable? Crevasse spat. The sacred edict is clear. No species expands without council permission. This has been law for 10,000 years. A law we enforce through overwhelming force, Wayla countered. The humans have demonstrated they can make that force costly. Perhaps it is time to reconsider whether that law still serves its purpose. The debate raged for hours. Velmoth listened, saying little. He had already made his decision, but he needed to let the Senate reach it on their own. Or at least, reach it in a way that would make them think they had decided. Finally, he spoke. Honored senators, I have reviewed all tactical data. I have consulted with military commanders, scientists, and observers who have studied the humans directly. My conclusion is this: we can destroy humanity. The question is not whether we can, but whether we should. He displayed the tactical projections. Best case scenario, we lose 10% of the fleet. Acceptable losses, some would say, but that is 10% of our military strength gone in a single operation against one species. And there are 37 other species within Council space who have submitted to our authority with varying degrees of resentment. The implications hung in the air. If the Council suffered significant losses fighting humanity, other species might see opportunity. Rebellion could spread. Worst case scenario, the humans' weapons function as advertised. We could lose 60% of the fleet and still not guarantee their complete extinction. At which point we would be vulnerable to any species that decides to challenge us. So we do nothing? Kravos demanded. We allow them to mock us? No, Velmoth said quietly. We do something the Council has not done in 10,000 years. We negotiate. We recognize their sovereignty over their current territory in exchange for agreements on future expansion. We turn a potential enemy into a potential ally. The chamber erupted in protest. Velmoth waited for the chaos to subside, then played his final card. Senators, I have received communications from 17 species within Council space. All of them are watching how we handle the humans. If we negotiate, some will see it as weakness. But if we suffer heavy losses in a costly war, all of them will see it as vulnerability. Which precedent do we prefer to set? The vote was close, but Velmoth had counted votes before calling the session. The Council voted to authorize negotiations with humanity, establishing them as a sovereign species within their solar system, subject to oversight on expansion to other star systems. It was not what the hardliners wanted. It was not complete independence for humanity. But it was enough. Velmoth returned to his flagship and prepared to do something no High Arbiter had done in living memory: negotiate terms with a species that had defied the Council and lived to tell about it. The meeting was held in neutral space on a small station hastily constructed between Mars and Jupiter. President Daehyun arrived with a small delegation. Defense Minister Hana, Chief Strategist Taimin, and Ambassador Jiwon, a former colony governor with a reputation for tough negotiating. Velmoth arrived with minimal security, a calculated gesture of good faith. The two leaders met in a simple conference room, their delegations waiting outside. High Arbiter, Daehyun greeted him. Thank you for coming. President, Velmoth replied. Thank you for not destroying my fleet when you had the opportunity. There was a moment of silence, then both leaders smiled slightly. The tension broke. Let's be honest with each other, Daehyun said. Some of our weapons were real. Some were exaggerated. Some were pure bluff. But you couldn't know which was which, and that was the point. I suspected as much, Velmoth admitted. But I could not afford to guess wrong. Tell me, the gray goo, was that real? Does it matter? You'll never know for certain unless you force us to use it. And if we do, neither of us wins. That's the beauty of a proper deterrent. Velmoth appreciated the honesty, even if it was frustrating. My people are not happy with this outcome. Many see it as surrender. My people aren't happy either. Many wanted to fight regardless of the odds. But here we are. Both of us doing what's necessary instead of what's popular. That's leadership. Over the next 3 days, they hammered out the details. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign species with full authority over their solar system, and any colonies they established on uninhabited worlds. In exchange, they would submit reports on expansion to the Council and agree to arbitration if their territorial claims conflicted with other species. It was not everything humanity wanted. It was not everything the Council wanted. It was compromise, which meant both sides were equally uncomfortable. The treaty was signed in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. Daehyun and Velmoth stood together as equals, witnessing marks on documents that would reshape galactic politics. This is only the beginning, Velmoth warned as they departed. The Council's hardliners will not forget this. They will look for ways to reassert control. Let them try, Daehyun replied. We've proven we can defend ourselves. And now we have legal standing to exist. That's more than we had a week ago. The Council fleet withdrew from human space, but something had fundamentally changed. Within weeks, 3 other species within Council space formally requested renegotiation of their status. The Council granted 2 of those requests, denying only the most aggressive claim. The precedent was set. The Council could be challenged and species could negotiate better terms. 6 months later, a formal Council diplomatic mission arrived at Earth. High Arbiter Velmoth himself led it, choosing to come personally rather than send subordinates. He was greeted by Ambassador Ji-won, who had been appointed as humanity's primary liaison to the Council. Welcome to Earth, High Arbiter, she said warmly. I hope you enjoy your stay. They toured the planet together. Velmoth was struck by the diversity. Different cultures, different languages, different systems of government all coexisting on one world. It was chaos compared to the ordered unity of Council worlds, but it was vibrant and alive in a way he had not expected. During a private dinner, Ji-won asked the question he had been avoiding. Did we really have all those weapons? Did you ever figure out which ones were real? Velmoth considered his response. I have my suspicions. The conventional defenses were certainly real. The solar weapons probably existed but may not have worked as advertised. The quantum disruptors were likely theoretical. The gray goo was almost certainly a bluff. Almost certainly, 90% certain. The remaining 10% keeps me awake at night. Ji-won smiled. Good. Uncertainty is healthy. It keeps us all honest. Was that your strategy all along? Make us doubt? Part of it. Humans have been playing poker for thousands of years. We understand bluffing. We understand that sometimes the threat of force is more effective than force itself. And we understand that the most dangerous opponent is the one you can't predict. Velmoth appreciated her candor. Your species is going to be trouble for the Council. Maybe. Or maybe we're going to be exactly what the Council needs. Someone to keep you sharp. Keep you questioning. Keep you from becoming so certain of your superiority that you stop growing. Over the following months, human-Council relations evolved into something neither side had anticipated. Trade agreements formed. Human engineers began working on joint projects with Council scientists, bringing fresh perspectives to ancient problems. Cultural exchanges started slowly, then accelerated as both sides discovered unexpected common ground. Engineer Tae-young collaborated with Council scientists on advanced propulsion systems, combining human innovative thinking with Council theoretical knowledge. Dr. Subin established an interspecies medical program, discovering that human and alien biology had surprising similarities. Captain Kyung-soo, the pilot who had delivered the warning after the cruiser's destruction, now led joint training exercises between human and Council defense forces. 1 year after the ultimatum, President Daehyun addressed the newly reformed Galactic Assembly. The Council had restructured itself, no longer a ruling body but a cooperative federation. Humanity had earned a seat, along with 4 other species who had negotiated their way from subjugated to equal status. 1 year ago you commanded us to surrender, Daehyun said, his words broadcast across the galaxy.